WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by JW Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. I want to thank you for being with us today. We're coming to you from Star Communications, Channel 16 TV, and we're also simulcast on WCLN Radio. And we're talking today with someone that you know the name. A lot of folks know a bit about him, but he's a senator here in North Carolina. We've been chatting before coming on air, and Senator Brent Jackson's with us, and that's Duplin, Johnson, and Sampson County, District 10.
That's correct.
And this is your sixth term in the Senate, Senator Jackson. Live right here in Sampson County. You got a deep, rich background and roots in Sampson County. You've got a sense of understanding agriculture. You chair some of the probably most, in a lot of folks' mind, in my audience, some of the most crucial committees in the Senate. First and foremost is appropriation-based budget. You chair that committee. You also chair agriculture, energy, and environment. You chair that committee. And I'll go down a list of those others as we kind of come back from different breaks, but those to me strike me for being crucial committees, two of the most crucial committees that we're looking at today, not only on the state level, but a global level. And especially as chair of appropriations, there's not many pieces of paper that doesn't pass your eyes before they go further in the Senate. With that said, and with that introduction, I want to thank you for taking time to be here.
Well, thank you, JW. It's always a pleasure to be with you and your audience. And, you know, I appreciate the times we've been together in the past, and I look forward to our conversations today. But you're absolutely right. Two of the, in my mind, as well as a lot of other folks, the appropriations-based budget, as well as Ag Committee, is two of the most vital committees for Eastern North Carolina and rural North Carolina as far as that goes. Because one, we can control the ag policy, which of course, you know, I'm a farmer by trade. And, you know, and that way we can control the money that goes with those policies. So those two committees are by far very important to rural and Eastern and Western North Carolina, but especially rural North Carolina.
Particularly one of the things I wanted to start with today, just for an observation, and I know you can't get into this for too deep for many reasons, but on folks' minds is this whole voter districting thing that's going on in the state. Anything that you could mention to that, any insight you could offer would be appreciated.
Well, the only insight I can give you is what you've seen on the news, because that's where I'm getting most of mine from. But we are currently in the process of trying to figure out exactly what the ruling was last Friday on, you know, the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, overturning our maps. And so that's what they're working on now, and we hope to have something put together actually in the next few days, if at the latest by the end of next week. So yeah,
I'm kind of like you in the sense that when I look at it, and my observation would be, and it seems to be relatively clear, that the court's decision was strictly down party lines. And with that said, there might not be anything else that needs to be said, but the big part of that is just looking at how in the world do you do that and make everybody happy with it? And I apparently there's not an answer to that.
Well, there's not, and we don't have the full ruling yet. It has not been written and made public, so we don't know exactly what to do at this point in time. But there's much smarter people than I working on this, and attorneys on both sides, and they're trying to figure out exactly what needs to be done. And you know, we'll do, according to what the ruling was, we'll do that to the best of our ability.
Fair and equitable to all.
Absolutely.
So let's move to the budget, and there's a lot of pieces of this I want to pull apart and kind of talk about, but let's just talk about a bit about how this budget came about. Obviously, it was not an easy task. Obviously, you saw a lot of paper, I'm sure, on this thing, but the budget appropriation of $25.9 billion for FY 21-22 and then a $27 billion for 2022. So let's talk about it a little bit, that biennium budget versus the annual kind of renewal, the 2-year renewal that you look at. Tell us how that works. And when you look at that, help us process the dynamics of preparing for a state budget.
I don't know if we got enough time today, but
we give college credits for this if you can pass.
Well, actually, in all honesty, the long session, which is when we create the 2-year budget, and we actually started preparing for the long session December of 2020. That we actually were working on the budget then, and we went wholeheartedly into working on it in January when we came into session. And so, the Senate had the budget the first time. I mean, every other session, it rotates between the House starts first or the Senate starts first. So 2021, the Senate started first. So, we had been working on this a long time. And, it's always been the Senate's philosophy since I've been a budget chair, that we have an agreement or at least some kind of parameters of how much we're going to spend. And see, we, at the time when we went in January and actually right on into April, thought we were going to have a huge deficit, but we got surprised. People spent more money than we anticipated they would spend. Revenues came in much greater than we expended. I mean, we had a windfall. And not only was the windfall good in North Carolina, it's for some $1 billion over what was projected. So when the Senate budget came out, it was considerably less than what it would have been with the House. But anyhow, and then we had all this federal money coming in, which made it even more complicated. And that's part of the reason it took us to November to get a budget. We just had way more money than we were accustomed to doing, and we had to go through each line item by line item and look at it, and through all the subcommittees and have them in. But that's sort of part of what it was. And then the House and Senate sort of got together on a spend number, and that's when we could put together a Senate budget. And so then when we got the abundance of cash that we were not expecting, we had to renegotiate with that as well. And so then the House and the Senate worked together, and we finally, the Senate passed the budget, sent it to the House, and of course they changed it to the way they wanted. And then we got together in conference and had to work out the conference and the differences between the two. And then at the same time, we were communicating with the governor's office because, at the end of the day, he has a part in this as well. And he had submitted his budget, and we used some of the items he had. Never in my tenure, and as I understand, never in history has a governor's budget just been approved when he sends it over. It's always been tweaked by the legislature branch, because that is our job, is making laws and appropriating the funds. And it's the executive branch to execute that. And that's what they do. But so, we worked with that, and then we sort of had a stalemate there back in the summer, and we couldn't get an agreement, with the governor, nor were we getting a full agreement with the House as well. But we finally got agreement with the House. And then as we worked later into the year, into September and October, is when we were able to come to agreement with the governor and get a budget finally signed in the middle of November.
I just sit here and listen to you talk about that. In that few minutes of conversation, you literally were talking about things that happened over months and years, literally bringing that together. This is a huge, complex ball to roll forward.
It is a huge, complex ball, and it goes, it's not that it goes over most people's head, but unless you're in it day in, day out, you just, you don't think that much about it, and that's rightly so. But, it is a daily thing. Normally from Monday through Thursday, sometimes Friday, sometimes even Saturday, and we have been up there on Sunday afternoons. We're going through this, trying to make it all work out in the long session. And then in the short session, which we should be coming into hopefully sometime soon, because we're still, we're technically still in session from the long session. This got to be one of the longest running sessions in history. But, we will tweak what we done this past year. We will not rewrite a whole new budget per se. But we will tweak upon what we did for the second year. of the biennium.
One of the things that I think also that I want to kind of touch on quickly here in this first segment is this idea of how government works. And when I look at it from the inside as with a small little lens I can look at, and this is a question for you, it's clear that we've got a great way to get input from people to make things happen, to move it forward with balance between the executive branch and the legislative branch. This government we got, we should be pretty proud of it. Would you not say that's true?
Well, I think that's perfectly true. And I think, that's 100% true. We should be extremely proud of what we have here in North Carolina. And that's partly because of our forefathers many decades ago and centuries decided, we needed a balanced budget. Mm-hmm. And it's in our Constitution. And that's one thing that sort of binds us different than some states and definitely makes us different than the nation. Now, whether, a lot of folks out there probably would disagree that government works, but it actually does in North Carolina for the most part. Now, you hear of the contentious issues, but, those are 1 or 2% of the things we do that are making it contentious. But I guess all the news, the other 98%, you hear very little about. And we do work together on most of the things between parties, but it's those few contentious things that you hear all the news about.
And those things that we often hear about sometimes takes the air out of the room, and folks maybe don't get a chance to sit down and look at it and say, well, I really had input into that because I was part of the people that elected this person to look after this interest. And those kinds of things are critically important.
Oh, they are important. And, we have constituents come visit us. We have emails all the time. I mean, day in, day out. I mean, have Facebook messages. I was on there this morning with a constituent with an issue. And, so they have input into how things get changed and done about with. And so that's part of our democratic process, and it's working here in North Carolina.
We're going to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We Should Know's on there. Call a friend. Stay tuned.
Let's get out of here.
Protect what matters most in your life with security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. My name is JW Simmons. I'm your host. Our guest today is Senator Brent Jackson. Senator Jackson, thank you for being with us. And Senator Jackson, thank you for your service to the state of North Carolina and to your fellow citizens here.
Well, thank you, JW. You're more than welcome, and so are my constituencies. It's been an honor of my life to serve in the North Carolina Senate, and I've been extremely proud of what we've been able to accomplish in the last 12 years, and or this year is in our 12th year, or my 12th year. And so, look forward to continuing working with the folks for the betterment of the citizens of North Carolina.
Well, as I introduced you earlier, I talked about the years of service you've had in, which is 6 terms. That equates to 2 times 6, so 12 years has gone by fast. Duplin, Johnston, and Sampson County is part of your constituency base that actually elects you to be there. Clearly, you have a background in agriculture as an agribusiness person right here in Sampson County and understand the dynamics of that. We are talking about the budget, and I want to get back to that. As you looked at and worked to pull this budget together over nights, days, weekends, over the past months, there were compartments, and I want to kind of compartmentalize it a little bit and let you speak to anything in those departments you would like. But one of the things that struck me is that everybody was saying, I need more money, you need to get more raises. Salaries were a huge component of that. And certainly, there's a lot that I know you want to speak to in this, and I don't want to guide this at all, but there were pay raises, there were bonuses, there was other incentives for state employees. Talk to us about how hard it was to get that together and satisfy not only expectations, but demands.
Right. Well, let me back up a little bit to what I said earlier. I am honored to be in this position, and I'm also very humbled that the constituency keeps reelecting me, and I appreciate that very much. I don't know of anyone that did not receive some type of pay raise in this budget. We tried to be fair and across the board with them. Some got a little more, some got a little less. It just how it worked out within each departments and agencies as we move forward. You know, we always hear about teacher pay, but we have been very good about trying to give teachers raises over the last 6-7 years, and we continued that this year. Now, a lot of them, the retirees will argue they didn't get a COLA, but they did get a bonus. And so, you know, and some teachers and some employees, state employees, did not get a permanent raise, but they got bonuses as we move forward. And that's part of back in the first segment when we were talking about how the budget comes together. The House and the Senate got together and decided, you know, we're going to spend this much money on salaries and we'll just divide it out amongst all those things. And so, you know, that's how we done it. And so we've tried to be as fair in this budget as we could, because there was a lot of money we could use for salaries, and a lot of it, the money we had, we couldn't use for salaries. And so we used what we had in that area.
Well, the budget, when you look at it from the raise point of view versus the bonus point of view, the bonus point of view only gives you a certain amount of money for one time. The raise gives it for the lifetime. That is correct, and it keeps compounding. And that's part of the problem we have, and you've heard the treasurer speak about it numerous times, the unfunded not unfunded mandates, but unfunded liabilities that we have, is because that anytime you give a bonus a pay raise, that just keeps accumulating and getting bigger, sort of like a snowball going down the hill. It keeps getting bigger year after year after year. Same way with COLAs. COLAs continually, when you give a true COLA, it will continue to add to the salary or the retirement of that individual, which actually has become part of the problem. I mean, because we're setting, $50-60 billion in unfunded liabilities. Now there's a lot to be said about that, because that includes also the hospitalization that we're paying, for the retirees. But at the same token, that is if the majority of everyone retired at one time, it would be due. Well, if that's the case, it would bankrupt the state. But that's not probably going to be that's likely not going to happen. But we still have to keep funding. I think this past year we put $138 million to shore up the retirement fund and the hospitalization fund, as well as we put that much, and actually I think it's 158 in the year too, because if we don't put that much in there, the retirement account will not be level and balanced as those payments are going out to the employees or to the retirees. So, a lot of folks don't take that into consideration, but we have not missed that since I've been in the North Carolina Senate. We have always given that money in there to make up that difference of what the returns minus, the expenses were. And that's what it's been, because this is a much bigger problem than we've probably got time to discuss. But the retirees are getting 7% on their money, and I don't know anyone in the last several years that has got 7% on their money. And that includes not only state employees, but it also includes a lot of local employees who are on the state plan as well. Now, that's another side to this thing. The state when we give out these bonuses, they go to the state employees. Now, that does not necessarily cover the local employees, like Sampson County, for instance, has employees in the system, I'm sure. And so it's sort of up to them to make that up on there as we move forward. But it is a very complicated, I like to call it a spider monkey, because there's so many things moving around so quickly. Well, and I think it gets back to one of your comments in the first segment, regards to it literally could take several months to try to go through it and explain in detail. And some of these things I'm sure you've learned over the past 10, 12 years to be able to articulate it. But at the end of the day, what I hear you saying is that it might look like it's small individually on a piece of paper when you say $1,500 bonus or $800 bonus, but when you draw that out, it gets to be a huge deal.
It gets into the hundreds of millions easily.
One of the things that I want to kind of try to tie a nexus here with is that not only state employees and retirees and increases, but one of the big things right now that folks like you in business are facing, and I've had it put to me as the key issue, is employability. We do not have people that will work for us. And I kind of put it in that kind of sentence because it's simple. Without people to work for you, then things tend to shut down. And if business is shut down, the state is not making and selling things, I don't think, to try to generate revenue. So help us understand how important it is for folks to kind of look at, wait a minute, we got to have people to work to accomplish things, whether it's truck drivers or whatever. We just recently had a show about that whole idea of employability.
Well, we all got to have employees, and we're employees of someone. And, so you have to have those. And part of the problem we've seen during this pandemic is, and it was created a lot by the federal government. I mean, because the state unemployment benefit was within reason and within our 5, what we call southeastern states. We were in the medium there with them. But then when the feds kick in a $600 a week, that put a lot of folks making, $8, $9, almost $1,000 a week, and they didn't even have to work. So you really can't blame that employee because they were making more on unemployment than they were making when they were working. I mean, so that's a fine line too. I mean, they done what they thought was best for their family in most cases, but that's not sustainable. And as we've seen, that the feds have stopped that. And so, it's come back to the normal level, but we're still having major issues of getting employees back into work into the industries across this state and across this nation as a whole. Mm-hmm. I know you've seen the great exodus of employees that has just decided they're no longer going to be in the workforce that we've seen in the last few months coming on the news and so forth. But we have to make it as enticing, and that's part of the problem with state employees, because they've always had these decent to really a good benefit package, but the salaries have not always kept up with the private sector. Mm-hmm. And so that's some of the things we tried to do in this budget, is give some of these agencies more money so they can compete to some degree in the private sector, because instead of just being a training ground for a lot of employees, they're able to retain them. And that's key now, as short as employees are, is that knowledge they have and being able to retain those employees. So there was many millions of dollars put into that for retainment purposes, as well as trying to justify, level out the playing field when it comes between private and state employees.
Just thinking back very quickly, pre-COVID, was employment an issue pre-COVID, or has this whole employment thing been brought on by COVID, or has COVID just expanded something that was already there?
Well, I think pre-COVID, we were at one of the lowest unemployment rates we had seen in decades. And so I think this has been brought on by the pandemic. It's also been brought on by the federal government being overzealous in giving out funds. I mean, because that to me was not very prudent on their part. And as well as the other billions of dollars they've sent out. I mean, it's just, at the end of the day, I'm still a conservative. And as I told someone, spending all that federal money that we had to spend or lose it, we just had to do it prudently. And that's part of the reason it took so long to get a budget. We made sure we didn't want to just throw it away. Because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money. It's not the feds, it's not the state, it's taxpayers.
And I think that's a good point. And you mentioned a while ago, the state works off of a balanced budget mandate, whereas the federal government doesn't. And that national debt clock, and I periodically look at it with some dismay, but I look at it and I see like 26 trillion, and then 2 or 3 months later, I look at 31 trillion. At what point is this, some of these things not sustainable? Because if the federal government's not working, that's going to be an issue for the state as well. It
will be. And, the path we're currently on the federal is not sustainable by no stretch of the imagination, in my opinion. And it's going to, I jokingly have said over the last year, I says, I'm just waiting for China to call in the notes. And, and so, that is a serious issue. But I am not in favor also of just automatically going to the feds and say, you got to have a balanced budget, because that would bankrupt this country overnight. But they've got to put something in place, in my opinion, to start reining this spending in and cutting down on some of this, what I call free money they're throwing out there. But it's not free. It is taxpayers' money.
I want to follow up on that when we come back from break. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We're talking with Senator Brent Jackson. The discussion right now is on budget. We're going to go through a lot of things. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
Just because something may work doesn't mean it's right for your business. Let Star Communications' knowledgeable consultants help you customize a hosted voice system that's right for you. Our dedicated experts work with you to understand your business needs and guide you at every step, from choosing and installing services to ongoing maintenance and support. Contact Star today.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. We're talking about your money. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about the state budget from a man that knows quite a bit about that, and that's Senator Brent Jackson. Senator Jackson, you chair the Appropriations Committee. You chair Commerce and Insurance. You're a member of Finance and a member of Commerce and Insurance. I looked over the committee list, and I struck me that going over each committee that you're part of or participating in, or that you chair, may take 5-10 minutes of precious time I want to ask you questions about. So I want to get back in their conversation about the budget, and particularly about finances. The state budget has a section in there called Infrastructure and Jobs. Now, to me, that kind of builds into everything from some building needs to jobs related to things that go on in state governments. A big chunk of that is in education, particularly university system and community college system. Having some history background as trustee at community college, tell us what that means and what you think the impact of the funds we're talking about here will be.
Well, the funds that we put in the budget this past year, JW, are going to have a tremendous impact across this state, not only in infrastructure. And when we say infrastructure, we're talking about like broadband, we're talking about water and sewer projects, we're talking about waste projects. But we're also talking about new campuses, buildings, and we're talking about repair. We actually granted, when we met with the UNC president and his team and the Board of Governors, the chairman and their team, their main goal was, let's do the repairs and maintenance on the buildings we have. Let's don't build new buildings while we let others. And that's been a history here in North Carolina. We'll build a new building on a campus, but we'll let the other ones run down and not do the maintenance. So that is the first thing we funded in the UNC system, was their request for building and maintenance repairs. And so that was that was in the billions of dollars. But then also at the same time, we were able to do that $400 million to the community college system as well. And so, that is allowing them to do repairs and maintenance as well as new buildings as needed. And so, we've got enough, in my opinion, we have more than enough buildings in this state to educate our young people. Or older people, either way you want to look at it. But we need to make sure we're looking after what we have. And we have so many water systems and sewer systems in this state that are just in dire repair. We were able to put a lot of money towards that, and it hasn't gotten to them yet. I actually was having a conversation yesterday with a mayor of one of my towns, and it's not got there yet, but it is on the way. And so that's going to be instrumental in watching this state evolve and getting some of our infrastructure needs brought up to speed. Is that going to solve the whole problem? Absolutely not. I mean, it's going to take billions upon billions of dollars to get our infrastructure projects up to the standards they need to be with the growing population. That's another issue we've got going on we hadn't even talked about, is, people love North Carolina. They're coming to North Carolina, and that's really a good thing. I mean, we have the right business climate. We've been ranked number one, and we have, of course, the most beautiful state in the nation, in my opinion, but I'm very prejudiced on that, but because I love North Carolina dearly. But, those things we're having, we're over 10 billion people now. And so, or is it 10 million? I can't remember which it is. I think it's is it million or billion?
I think it's million.
I think it's million too. But we have a lot of folks coming in, and that's causing issues too. I mean, not only, with housing needs as well as the infrastructure that goes along with that. And we haven't even begun to touch on the DOT issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the roads, that is something that is ongoing. I mean, we are continually looking at ways to find new funding sources for DOT, because with the gasoline miles per gallon going up in these newer vehicles, the gas tax is not working, even though we've got one of the highest in the Southeast. That is not working. We have got to come up with more ways to do that. We also were able, and have started looking at electric vehicles, and we've got to figure out a way to charge them fairly because they're using the roads as well. Mm-hmm. And it's right comical in some ways to me that the folks driving these electric vehicles don't think they owe any gas tax, which they don't owe no gas tax, but they owe some type of tax because they're using the roads as much as you and I are with our gas vehicles. So there's a lot of infrastructure needs still ongoing in this state, but I think you will see a lot of it being done out in the next 4, 5, 6 years, because that's how long it's going to take to spend some of this money. Mm-hmm. And because part of that problem is going to go back to what we were just talking about earlier, is getting folks to do the work. Mm-hmm. There's not enough people out there in North Carolina or any other state in the nation that I'm aware of to do all the work that this federal money is coming in for infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And then we've seen inflation, it started rising, and that's the other thing. You've got all this money flowing with all these projects, so that's caused input costs to go up. And so we're even beginning to see some of that now. In just the last week or two, we've heard, some of the money we appropriate is not going to be enough to finish the project because of inflation. So there's a lot of things moving in this infrastructure area, but we are making strides at trying to do it and put the money where it can do the most good.
One of the things that strikes me, and I want to touch on about 2 or 3 things you mentioned in the infrastructure part, is one of them, and I've got to get this in, is the broadband issue, and a little bit, I guess I'm a little bit biased, but Star Communications has done a great job getting fiber in the ground and connecting customers here in Sampson and Bladen, and I think part of Duplin, and even part of Cumberland. I'm hoping I'm getting everybody into county-wise, but that's been very important. They've been very aggressive in that, and they've been very successful in getting some grants to help support that. How critical is that going to be to offset some of the building needs that you refer to, in the sense that we've now seen that we can do a lot via the internet? We can do classes, we can do complete education programs via connectivity, but we got to have that speed and that broadband capability. We've got to have it.
It doesn't matter whether it's for educational purposes or whether it's for communicating with your folks that working with you. But you take to the farm, there's packing lines right now today that is running that has to have internet connection in order to do certain things, especially when it comes to repair. I mean, we have a packing line that a gentleman in California or Texas can get on the phone with us and he can run into our system, VPN to it, to the machine, and tell us what's going on with it. I mean, that is crucial in rural North Carolina. So, Star Telephone has done an excellent job over the decades of moving forward and getting that, because a lot of us on Star service are far more advanced than they are on private service. And so my hat's off to them for the forward thinking that they had done years and decades ago to get us to the point we are now. But there is still, sadly, a lot of folks in this county that does not have access to broadband. And that is what we're trying to do, is get those last miles out there to these folks that do not have it. And there was $100 and some billion or $1 million put into that. Mm-hmm. And so, there's continually more going to be done as we move forward. There again, we put in about $600 million total for broadband, mm-hmm. but they can only spend about at best $300 million a year because of employees, right, and getting materials. That's another issue now, is materials.
I think what I hear you saying, there's not a quick fix for any of this. It's a process you put in place, and it will happen over years.
Well, you probably described it much better in just a few short words than I did in 10 minutes. But bottom line is, you're right. I mean, but we have started in that direction, which is very crucial. We've made the steps to start putting the funds there to get these things done. But it's not going to happen overnight.
Well, we got 2 or 3 minutes before we're going to go to a break, but I want to back up also and touch on something that seems to be an evolving issue, and depending on which communication platform you look at, it's more immediate than the other. And this is this whole aspect of EVs, electric vehicles. Right. When we talk about that, it becomes a reality that there's a move, and there are vehicle companies and others that are making these vehicles, but the infrastructure is not there yet, and it's particularly in rural North Carolina. And I'm guessing similar in rural United States. The infrastructure is far from being in place, and you hit a subject that I think folks need to understand. That the roads, and I want to get to that if we have to put it into the next segment, but the roads are critically part of that, because how do you pay if all of a sudden you see folks going to electric vehicles and there's no way to have any income from that for roads, and they're still using the roads? How do you deal with that? What are you thinking of in the future to deal with that?
Well, there's a lot of things being discussed to deal with the shortfall from the gas tax, which used to fund the roads. But there is so many needs out there now, and it gets back to the population growth. We've got so many more cars on the road, that's causing more deterioration of the infrastructure that's there now. There's a lot of things being discussed, such as a per vehicle charge or tax, if you want to call it that. Just like when you have to pay your license fee every year, you might have to pay something for the vehicles, and that would be based on each vehicle. There is some point of discussion of taking part of the sales tax and attributing it to the DOT for that. There's also the real process and thought process is moving towards, we just might have to start appropriating money directly to DOT and shoring them up, just like we talked about earlier in the segments, with the retirement. We might have to shore them up again, and we've done some of that in the last couple of years.
So I think that as we kind of come to close on this particular segment, and looking at this infrastructure thing, what piece of that troubles you the most when you think about it that we need to really get on now to be ready for it in the next 2 to 4 years?
Well, the thing that troubles me the most is making sure we've got the employees out there, because that is a national concern. It's definitely a state concern. We just do not have enough employees willing to do this work, or that are available to do this work currently. And that is, to me, has been my concern the whole time. And I've jokingly, but I was seriously about it. With all this money going out there, we just don't have enough employees to get it done.
Going to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Senator Brent Jackson about a number of issues that we could literally spend a lot of time on, but time is going fast. We'll be back in a moment. We'll come back and talk about some more issues that you need to know about.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. We want to continue to thank you for your input regards to subjects on this show that we call We Should Know. For all those folks out there that might be on red, green, orange, or blue tractors today listening, and I've got a listening audience on those tractors, and I thank you for being with us. We do appreciate and understand the input and the dynamic that you add to this thing we call an economy in North Carolina. We'd like to ask you to continue to send your comments, questions, suggestions to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. That's weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And as always, you can drop us a card or letter or whatever to Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. If you happen to be from this area, it would be Clinton, North Carolina. Clinton and Clinton are the same town. So just want to make sure you understand that as our audience continues to grow. We do get comments oftentimes that maybe our pronunciation is off, but we do have two different ways of looking at it. So I want to thank you for being with us today. And I want to get back quickly to the person we're talking to, which is Senator Brent Jackson. Senator Jackson, again, thank you for being with us. You're coming on this last segment. A lot of stuff. We can never unpack all this. Knew that going into the conversation today. We're talking about infrastructure, some of the things going on with infrastructure, some of the build projects, broadband, critically important, other issues. One of them we alluded to was DOT. With DOT also comes roads. Roads, most of the time people see happening in rural areas are I'll say back roads, but paved roads that need attention badly. You know that. You're an agribusiness person. You know it well. You see these things happening. Is some of these state funds at some point in time, or is there going to be some way to allocate funds to shore up these roads that have experienced over the past probably 20 to 30 years, large trucks and others hauling agricultural products that were never built for that?
Yes, there is. Every year we put some money into those, what they call resurfacing and potholes. I mean, is probably the common term for it. Mm-hmm. But that is a separate fund than a lot of the main highway funds, and which is, like the interstates, which the interstates is all federal money for the most part, but then the state roads like, 242 or 421, that's a totally different section than when we're doing repairs and repatching, as well as the potholes, as well as total resurfacing. That is a totally different section in the budget, in the DOT budget that is done. And so there's been money put in there, as well as the bridge, the bridge funds. I mean, because we still have probably well over 1,000 or more bridges in this state that are really in dire repair, and some even unsafe and has been stopped or closed, and they're working on those as hard as they can as well.
When we look at that, the obvious next question or input request would be the federal funds that we've heard that phrase that's been coined, Build Back Better funds. And how will that affect the potential of utilizing some of those funds in improving some of the roads in rural areas in North Carolina?
From my understanding of what I have seen so far, should that get all passed and finalized, it will have a tremendous impact on DOT's infrastructure in trying to build that stuff back. Now, granted, a lot of that will probably go to your 95s and 40s and 85s, 77s in that range, but at the same token, it will still flow down more to allow more funds of the state money to go to this other set of resurfacing and repairs and maintenance.
We some time back we had Secretary Eric Boyette sitting in that chair, and we talked a bit about this, and it's clear that he understands that need for rural areas and rural roads to be repaired. And it's not just the volume of traffic; it's literally, as you know, the weight of traffic. These roads endure a lot, and so I wanted to kind of get that out there to let folks know that it's not unheard in the House and Senate. It is a known thing, and you guys are looking at that. Well,
I'd like to say, Secretary Boyette has been great to work with, and he is from rural North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, and so he understands our issues here. But yes, those are things that we are working on continually together to try and make sure that we do get and they're all ranked in the importance of, has there been traffic fatalities in the area because of the roads, or is the roads rutted out because of heavy truck traffic? And we do have some of those in here in Sampson County, I know of, as well as other counties as well, because of rock quarries we might have, or sand quarries, predominantly sand quarries, that is tremendous traffic, and those roads just wear out. And so there is a lot of emphasis being put on some of those our rural roads here in Eastern North Carolina.
I want to try to get this in again. We're in the last segment. If I don't touch on savings and taxes, I'm going to be in trouble because the taxes is always an issue. One of the first things in that particular section strikes me is that increases the zero tax bracket. The amount of income of which person may pay to actually pay no taxes. You increase that to what, 25,500?
I think so. That is correct.
That's the numbers I've got.
Yeah. I think it's 24.5 and then 25.5 the following year, I believe is the way it's worded.
So what is the significance of that, and is there some way, in an analytical way, money, dollars way, that's going to benefit not only the state but people that's actually having to pay taxes? I get it from not having to pay taxes on that amount of money, but the other part of it is, how does it either positively or negatively impact the state?
Well, it's going to negatively impact the state as far as revenue, because that means we'll just round it off at $25,000. Everybody's first $25,000 is not being taxed. Mm-hmm. So that is a tax break that most folks don't realize or don't even, we never get credit for that. Right. I can just say that.
Exactly.
But I mean, that is $25,000. Your first $25,000 are not taxed. And but that is some of a revenue hit to the state, but it's not enough to justify not doing it, because it's the right thing to do, because we feel like in the end it is getting us closer to what we want to eventually get to, I hope, and I hope we continue to move in that direction, is to a zero state tax. And so that is part of that step of getting there.
I think that statement right there would probably just got a standing ovation. I'm not sure, but so you also had cuts to personal income tax from 5.25% to 3.99%.
That's over the biennium. That is correct.
So that's pretty huge.
That is huge. We were making great strides in trying to get to that zero. I don't know that we'll ever get to zero. I don't know if there's a need to get to zero, but we definitely need to get to where we're at, which is the 3.99 at the end of, hopefully at the end of this year, or the end of it's either 2024, I think, is when that finally goes into effect.
And we hear a lot about child tax deductions, but you actually increase the child tax deduction by $500 per child. That's for a person that's in that bracket of $30,000 to $40,000 a year. That's huge as well. It's got 2 or 3 children. That's
exactly right. If someone that's making $30,000, $35,000 a year should not be paying very much tax to the state.
I know we're coming up here in a few minutes. We're going to have to close out, but these things are so critically important. And I don't know that. I guess I would say it in another way. I wish we had more coverage and more time to talk about the incremental parts, because sometimes the flashpoints is all that gets covered. Does that make sense to you?
That makes perfectly good sense. It's sort of like the old saying, the devil's in the details. Well, the good is actually in some of these details that never get out there. And that is one of them. I mean, our tax package, I mean, we are continually lowering the tax brackets. I mean, we're raising the amount that you have to pay on, as far as the 22 to 24, 25,000, you don't pay on that. We've raised that over the last several years, but we're also lowering the rate, as we just discussed, down to the 3.99 at the end of, and I think it's 2024 that takes effect.
I think it's right.
Because I have a lot of numbers running through my brain, imagine. But I think it's 2024.
Well, and the other thing talking about appreciation for service, one of the things that struck me that probably don't get mentioned is it eliminates state income tax on military pensions.
We did that as well.
That is a huge thing for folks that's on military pension.
That is a huge benefit, and I see that actually being a truly benefit to the state, because we're losing a lot of our military retirees moving to other states, and that's some of those, you colonels and your majors and your generals, they're making considerable amount of money, and that tax being exempt is a big deal to them.
And for businesses, I want to get this one in, actually reduces and simplifies the franchise tax on businesses.
Yep. That's been one of my pet peeves. I
can imagine. Yeah.
The franchise tax to me is sort of, and I hope our county commissioners aren't necessarily listening, but it's sort of like a property tax. Yeah. I've always said you never get anything paid for, because you always got to pay property tax.
Absolutely. You never really own it.
Yeah, you never really own it. And that's the same thing with a franchise tax. A business can actually lose money, but they still owe a franchise tax. And that's just wrong. And so we have been working on that several years. We finally, and I'm glad you brought that up because I'd forgot it, we have finally made some progress in getting that lowered. And, there again, it's my goal. Now, whether I don't always get everything I wish for, I would wish we would eliminate that franchise tax, because I've actually had large corporations in my district tell me, say, leave the income tax where it is or raise it, but please do away with the franchise tax, because we're paying several $1 million in franchise tax, irregardless if we make any money or not. And so, to me, that's just wrong. I mean, we need to do away with the franchise tax.
We're coming up, and I'm going to try to squeeze this in. And this is education, but this has got to be said. An additional $1.5 billion, 10% increase above the base budget for K through 12 education over the biennium.
That's great.
We know the big chunk of money goes for education in the state budget,
It does.
And that still is
7%.
And this is another step in that direction. I'm going to give you a few seconds here to close. We've got about 20 seconds. So.
Okay. Well, that's something, education is extremely important to all of us, because we have to educate our young people and our children, and we want them to be able to succeed just as, we feel like we have with our education. So that's important that we continually fund it, and that's one of our key things that we've done in the last several years, even though we get very little credit for it.
Want to thank you for being with us today. We're going to do a quick close here. Look forward to having you back. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Senator Brent Jackson. Hope to have him back soon. As you can see, we just touched on a few key issues with the state budget. We'll see you again next week, and may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host JW Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.